Welcome back. You've made it to the last session. I'm excited. I hope that it's not been too painful for you. And we are well on our way to fully experiencing gratitude every day. Yay! I'm excited about it. So let's recap. We have defined gratitude. We've talked about what hinders gratitude, like fear and busyness. And we've talked about the importance of acknowledging the gifts around us. And we've come up with a plan to get us to our goal of feeling grateful every day and making that a habit. Yay, okay. So let's start with our definition. If you recall, I'm going to try to tie this back into the first session. Our definition had two distinct parts. It had an inward-focused part and an outward-focused part. So our definition was the quality of being thankful and ready to show appreciation and return kindness. And you can really see the two parts when you look at those verbs. So you can be thankful. That's something completely within you. But you can also be ready to show appreciation and return kindness. So that's active and outward focused. And if you haven't figured this out yet, we've only done the first part. So I'm a little slow. But today we're finally moving on from that inward to the outward focused part of gratitude. So today our focus is outward expression. That is the part of the definition of being ready to show appreciation and return kindness. And here's the crazy part, is for some of us, this is actually the hardest part. And I know that might sound a little strange, but I promise we'll get there. So no matter if you're feeling encouraged by all this talk of gratitude, or maybe even a little discouraged right now, not to worry, we're still taking baby steps and we're gonna get there. And we're gonna begin with my favorite way, with a question. So the question I want you to ask is, do I currently express my feelings of gratitude through my words and actions? So do you currently express your feelings of gratitude through words and actions? So maybe some of us I make a conscious effort every day to do this. That's great. Maybe we're at a point where we say, I don't really think about it that much. I'm sure I do express it, and then sometimes I'm sure I forget. So it's just not on my radar, and that's okay. And then there might be some of us who are at a point where we say, I am actively avoiding doing that right now. It's not comfortable for me. It doesn't feel good. It's kind of scary, and that's fine too. We're all starting in a different place. But I do want you to try to figure out, where am I today? No matter where we are on that scale, we have to figure out where that is, and then ask, where would I like to be? There's always room for improvement, I think. That's my philosophy. So let's revisit our goal. Our goal was to fully experience gratitude every day. Now remember, fully experiencing gratitude has two parts, and it requires an outward expression. So I wanted to kind of pause that line of thinking and digress for a minute to think about, what does gratitude look like if we're only applying one half of that definition? So, for example, I acknowledge a gift and I feel really thankful. I feel good about that, but I don't do anything about it. Is that a full expression or full feeling of gratitude? Am I missing anything? On the other hand, maybe I am outwardly saying and showing gratitude and saying, I'm very thankful, or I'm very blessed, without really truly acknowledging the gifts that create that feeling. Am I missing something there? And so I'm going on an assumption that if we have one half, but not the other half, then we can still feel good and we can still do good. But we are missing out on a little bit. I think that all gifts somewhere began with an act of God. Maybe that was, an act of God because he blessed you with a child. Maybe it's an act of God that goes way back into you've had opportunities and education that have led to a place where you've been blessed. But ultimately, I think it can all be traced back to God. And then I like to think, what am I supposed to do with that? Looking through the Bible and seeing the gifts that have been given to people, I'm pretty confident in saying that the gifts were always intended to be shared. That I don't think God gives us a gift thinking, and that's the end of it, and it's never going to bless anybody but this one person this one time. I think that his intention is that it continues on. It's like a cycle. So let's change our way of thinking about the outward expression to this. We experience thankfulness, we show it. And when we show it, that is received by another person, or maybe even to God as praise, but it is received by another entity. And that becomes a new gift to a new person. And then that person gets to feel thankful. And then they get to show it. And when they show it, it becomes yet another gift to yet another person. So the gift originated with God can eventually touch a multitude of people. And I really think that that's how God intended it to be. So, how are we going to either help or hinder that cycle? So I think that might be the better question to ask. So let's look at what it looks like to always have that in mind, that you are part of a cycle and that you have to show the gratitude on the outside to bless somebody else. We can all agree that that's a great thing. It makes us feel good. It makes somebody else feel good. So then why is it so hard? That's the puzzling part. And why does it have to be so hard? It seems like all the good things are so difficult. So we've talked a little bit about experts that I've brought in articles and things like that, and also from the book I'm Grateful, that kind of gave us our inspiration for talking about this subject. Everything those experts have said about gratitude is that it's not easy, and it could be because of genetics, brain chemistry, and our culture that are all making it difficult. And we talked about that in session 1. And if you remember, we also talked about social structure, that we live in a very hierarchical society. So we place some people above or below others, depending on a variety of factors. And that can be a pitfall for us. So I want to explore that for just a minute and why that makes it difficult for us to express our gratitude. So collectively, you and I live in a society that emphasizes independence. It makes me think of cliches like every man for himself, or you got to worry about number one. So we have a society that values very highly a sense of independence. I also want you to think about, have you ever heard or said the words, "We don't accept charity"? And I know what you're thinking, that's unrelated, but I promise it makes sense in my head. But have you ever come across that? I know I certainly have in my life. I mention that to pose yet another question, is why do we feel that way? Why do we value independence and say we don't accept help from other people? And the reason I want to ask that question is this. I propose that mentality views expressions of gratitude as a threat, as harmful. And what do? What does your brain do when you face danger? Right? If you're walking across the street and you see a car coming, your brain goes, oh, I need to run away. So it's really, I think, important to think about, am I having that flight or fight response to expressing gratitude? And then what can I do about it? And I will let you in on a secret. I don't know the answer to that. I am far from an expert. But I think that's as a start, is really getting to know ourselves. And does it have to be that way? What do we stand to gain from viewing gratitude as a threat? And what drives that mentality? So I don't want to be completely negative. Those are just some questions that I thought maybe we could think about together. And yes, they're deep, and maybe they're not pleasant for everybody, but I think necessary. But once we have that out of the way, we can explore together an alternative. And I think that begins with acknowledging that none of us can do life alone, with no help. No help from God, no help from other people. We can't do it. So what makes us think we can? If we're so focused on independence and we don't accept help from other people, there seems to be a gap in our logic. We know we can't do it alone, but yet we don't want help. So I found something that really shed some light on that for me. And it was this topic called forced perspective. This actually comes from a daily devotional called Turning Point with Dr. David Jeremiah, if anyone happens to follow him. And I really wanted to put this on the end of Session 4's links, but I could not find an archive for his past devotionals. So I'm going to try to maybe not read it word for word, but I want to convey everything he said since you don't have access to it. But here's what he has to say. Have you ever seen photographs that use the concept of forced perspective? So that's a technique that employs an optical illusion to make objects appear closer, farther, bigger, smaller. And I know you've seen it, even if you have never heard it called forced perspective. So think of a movie with dinosaurs. They would get a little tiny dinosaur, put it really close to the camera, put the people way far away, makes it look huge. Or people standing in front of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and they look like they're holding up the building because they're much closer to the camera. So that's a forced perspective. So turning that idea into what's this got to do with gratitude is Dr. Jeremiah says the devil tries to use forced perspective on us. He wants us to believe that our troubles are much bigger than they are. So if we look at our difficulties through the wrong lens, we'll magnify our burdens until they appear like they're ready to topple us over and crush us to death. And I'm sure we can think of examples of that we've dealt with in our life. But going back to gratitude is, are we looking at the outward expression of gratitude or even the receiving of a gift from somewhere? Are we seeing that through the wrong lens? Are we seeing it through a lens that our culture has defined that says we are independent and we don't need anybody? Or are we looking at it through the lens of God? So the more accurate lens that God has created shatters that illusion. Our troubles actually shrink in the light of God's greatness. I'm going to have a really elementary school word for you, His bigness. He's so big. He's so much bigger than any of these troubles that we have put in our minds. So a wise decision would be to cast off the lens that's this forced perspective that says, this is too hard, this is too much, this makes you too vulnerable, you can't do that. Into a more biblically driven lens that says, God's bigger than this. So let's come up with a plan. I like tangible plans and actions. Let's take that ego, that pride, whatever it is that's driving us to reject expressing our gratitude, and let's toss it away. Let's name it. It is forced perspective, and it is not of God, and I want it gone. I don't want it anymore. So get it out of the way. Now what happens? What happens when we make ourselves change our perspective? So I thought the best way to show this would be through an experiment. And if some of y'all know me and know that my favorite thing to do here at church is to teach science at Bible school, so I'm no stranger to experiments. I love them. Science experiments and social experiments. So this is going to be a social experiment. So right now, find whoever's closest to you. And if you don't have anybody around, call somebody. So find the closest person. And say, I appreciate you. And then follow it up with why. I appreciate you because. So I appreciate the folks in this room because they're helping bring a message of gratitude to all of you. So I appreciate you guys. Now, that wasn't so bad. Step 2. Ask that person, why do you feel grateful? Just why do you feel grateful right now? And there's no wrong answer to this. It could be something big or small. And follow that up with, how are you going to show that appreciation? What are you going to do about it? And one more thing for our social experiment is I want you to find somebody. It doesn't even have to be somebody you know. It could be a complete stranger. But if you're going about your day over the course of this week and you think, I really admire that person, you have to tell them this week. That's your job. It is Thanksgiving, and you can use that as an excuse. It makes it a nice, safe space to do this. If you admire somebody, say, I really admire you because, and then tell them why. Or, I've never told you this before, but I care for you. I love you, and this is why. Or you just really want to give somebody a hug, and you thought, that'd be too embarrassing. What if they are uncomfortable? Just do it anyway. So I can wrap that up by saying, at any point during the next week, if you have a positive feeling or something positive to say about someone, say it to them, to their face, and just see what happens. That's all you got to do. You don't have to tell me or anybody else, but I want you to kind of catalog and say, okay, I've got this fear, and I've done the exact thing that I'm afraid to do, and here's what's happened. And so that way we've got a new kind of social construct being built in our mind. So during the season of Thanksgiving, try this social experiment. And then keep it going. Don't stop with Thanksgiving. And I think that once we get in the habit of doing those outward expressions and getting rid of those fears, that I think we have made it to our goal of fully experiencing gratitude. So I've got a few Bible verses to kind of help guide you this week. And again, they'll be posted, so don't worry if you can't remember these. But I just want to share them with you now. First is Romans 12, verse 2. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." And Hebrews 13, verse 16 says, "And do not forget to do good and share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased." Notice that it's even called sacrifices in the Bible. And Matthew 5:16 is our last verse this week, and it says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So again, it's a gift. Now I want to say that I really appreciate all of you. And I thank you. I hope that you're able to get some good out of our conversations together and our journey. And I wish you a peaceful and joyful Thanksgiving filled with the deepest gratitude. And I want you to share your new habits of gratitude with those around you so that we can be a gift to everyone around us. And I wish I could say goodbye in person. I know that I don't even necessarily know who all is on the other side of the camera, but I do appreciate you, and I do pray for you. So if you would, close this final session with me in prayer. Father, bless us all with the gift of gratitude. Help us seek it out, recognize it, and share it freely. I am yours, and you are mine. As we pray together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.